Hello, Johannes. Thank you so much for being part of our speakers this year at the Natives. It would be great if you can start by introducing yourself. This is a video interview that we do after the Natives. We go online. It would be great if you start by introducing yourself and your topic, what you talked about here, and your field of work.
Thanks. So my name is Johannes Starlinger, and I'm an MD and a computer science PhD doing research at Charité Universitätsmedizin Berlin. Today I talked about data science in clinical care, especially about the data processing process or pre-processing process that we use to include both structured and also unstructured data into our research.
Great. So can you tell us a little bit some use cases from that? So what, using that data, the structure and unstructured, what kind of hypothesis and what kind of results did you got?
So one analysis that we're doing right now is that we're looking at the data intensive care patients create, or that is recorded for intensive care patients, into our databases, and we're trying to use that data to predict patient mortality, which means we try to have an estimate of the probability that the patient will die at some point in the future. That sounds weird, but it's actually a really good that's actually a really good parameter for knowing how sick the patient really is and how much care the patient needs. So that's one thing we're doing. Other things that we're looking at is how to make the analysis that we create available to doctors. So when a physician is at the intensive care unit and they have a specific question about constellations of parameters or how patients relate to other patients or what specific predictions are, for example, the mortality, and then that data is usually not readily available in the systems that the physicians have available right now. So we're looking at ways to make that data, make the analysis available, for example, using head-mounted displays such as augmented reality glasses and things like that. So that's for the structured data. Just stop me anytime, right? So for the unstructured data, there are a number of places at the hospital where data is not recorded very well in structured form. So, for example, in a preoperative context, before patients go through anesthesia, go through an operation, then might need intensive care hospitalization afterwards. So in a preoperative context, a lot of data is recorded in free-form text, right? So a lot of the parameters that might help us know in advance whether a patient will need intensive care after the operation, a lot of those parameters are actually not structured. So we can't easily train models to tell us whether a patient will need special care afterwards. So in situations like that, we want to pre-process the text to extract out information to then be able to use it for predictive outcome research.
But then how do you do that when it's unstructured? I'm still, can you give me a little bit more examples of that? I'm still a bit confused with that.
Well, right now we're not using that data because we have to extract it first. So we're looking at how we can easily get that data from the records using linguistic and machine learning approaches to first augment our dictionaries to create an understanding of the concepts that are available in the text and to then extract them from the text. So we're at a very early stage, especially, or at least at Charité. There are other clinics in Germany that are one step ahead already, but they're not sharing their algorithms. So we're starting over, just like everybody else.
So you have the hospital and you have the data from the hospital. I mean, it's also university hospital, so there's a lot of researchers there. But you, as far as I understand, you also have a lot of startups and you work with a lot of startups. So are those projects that you're doing right now with the data that you have potentially would spin to a specific company, for example, or am I missing something, or?
Well, we are working closely together with a number of startups. So we have one project that we're trying to acquire funding for with a company called Statis.io, which are specifically targeting the area of data anonymization. So for structured data, their approach is to create a synthetic data set based on a real patient data set where you cannot actually identify individual patients anymore, but where statistical properties of the whole data set are preserved so you can use the anonymized data set to train your machine learning models, which is really interesting because if once we're able to share data sets with third parties, we can multiply our workforce to start making use of that data, right? Because right now at Charité, we have people working with the data, but of course our resources are limited in a certain way. Yeah. Exactly. We're also looking into cooperations with other startups, especially for making use of time series data in the intensive care unit, because one special thing that we have in the intensive care unit is that data is recorded continuously, so especially vital signs are recorded continuously, and using this continuous time series structure in the data to improve our predictive algorithms is a very interesting topic. So we're working with startups in that area to make use of time series data too.
A big topic I think I've been listening over and over again in healthcare is about blockchain and the use of blockchain. And because you're talking about anonymized data sets, I'm wondering if you're also working with companies or startups that they are based on blockchain, or are you considering potentially taking your data and putting it on the blockchain?
So I think blockchain is a really interesting technology, and there's a lot of hype around it also in the healthcare sector. Personally, I think blockchain is not where it needs to be readily applicable to our types of data analysis. So I think it's a very interesting approach, especially when it comes to empowering patients or other customers like people, humans, to make use of their data and maybe to even create revenue from their data. I think for things like that, the blockchain as we know it right now might be ready. For other types of applications, I think there still has to be quite some work and research done to get there.
You are a data researcher, but you're an MD as well, mainly working in healthcare, but would you consider, for example, other areas where would you apply data science? Or are you think that, any other areas, not you personally perhaps, but any other areas where you think that data science could really be very useful?
That's a trick question, right? So I think we've seen, today we see like most every area affected by data generated and analysis generated over that data again, and then insights created from those analysis and improvements to the way we work, to the way we live, to the way processes in the industry in most every area of our lives are defined, right? Driven by data science. So I think the question could be, maybe I can ask you back, name an area where data science is not applicable.
No, you're right. I was just wondering if, given that there's a lot of excitement, I think, around healthcare, right, and data science, because there's so much data and there's a lot of things coming out of it. I feel like the time is now to be discussed, where before a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have said that. I was just wondering what's the next big thing that you see happening, like where do you think the next area where we will see data science be applied at the moment would be, but where is the data mature enough, or where do we have the technical capacity to do stuff like that?
Yeah, fun question. So an area that interests me specifically, and I think where we're hearing a lot of things at this conference, is how the data that affects every one of us that we generate every day, with not only in health care systems, but also outside of it. How that data can be put under our control, how algorithms that work upon this data can be constructed such that they can be used for the good of us of our society, of our community, right? How we can all contribute to this development. So I think now that over the past 5 years, the concept of data science has established itself, right, and maybe gone over the top tip of the Gartner curve. And I think now it's time to think about how we can use our understanding of how data can be analyzed and processed to enable every one of us to make best use of their own data and of our collective data to improve our lives. And not only for us here in civilized, centralized countries, but also in areas of the world where data is a luxury, right? Where data is not collected in the way we know it here, but where people are struggling with much more, let's say, down-to-earth problems. Like how can the improvements we achieve with data science here, how can we transport them to those areas of the world? I think those are questions that are coming up, and I think this is an interesting place. This conference is an interesting place to discuss topics like that, and we see a lot of these questions discussed.
Cool. Thank you very much for this comment. And on one last question, on that note, being here in this conference, what would you say is your impression of this conference?
I think it's quite a lively place. There are a number of different areas and topics and very open people. So I like coming from a research background and research conferences, which are very lively places too. Here I feel the atmosphere is generally very open. Everybody's very interested to learn things, to discuss things, to exchange ideas, to innovate, to maybe ask questions like you just did, and to push forward our understanding of how we can use data and what data can do for us as a society.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.